Welcome to the Love That Guy podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Ronnie Gene Blevins.
And this is Brendan Reynolds.
He got third all for billing at the end of each picture. That don't really mean much, he would say with a grin. But he held my hand tight when he poured his name out. Only 4 or 5 names down below Errol Flynn.
We are the show that celebrates the journeyman actors, the actors we all know and love, and even though we might not always know their names, we inevitably see them in film and television and think to ourselves, love that guy. Welcome back to the Love That Guy podcast. Brendan, how you doing, buddy? It's good to be with you.
Good, Ronnie. Good to see you, man. First time doing on this format. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, man. We're kind of in opposite states. All three of us are in different states. Us, our producer, Mark, and Brendan. And I'm splitting time between L.A. and Austin, 2 weeks in L.A. and two weeks in Austin. And Brendan, you're out in Minnesota, yeah?
Here in God's country in Minnesota, yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's fun to be back, man. I love the fact that we have Louis Herthum on today, and we'll do a little introduction with him shortly. But what I love about Louis is, as we'll mention in the show, man, this guy is the quintessential veteran actor, and then he moved out here like in 1980, man.
Yeah, I mean he's OG.
Yeah, I believe he got a SAG card in 1982, which means he's been in the union for over 40 years. You know. And it's so interesting that like he really kind of found the role that propelled him in his 50s. But yeah, man, I'm a fan of his. I worked with him a little bit on Westworld.
And True Blood, right?
At True Blood, we didn't work together. I think he was a werewolf and I was a werewolf, so I think we were kin.
Werewolf,
yeah,
cousins.
Yeah. But there's a lot of interesting things with him. Like, he had taken a break. I don't want to, well, I'm sure we'll let him get into it. But like he got True Blood after taking like a 4-year break,
Right.
And then, and of course, we'll go on to talk about Westworld. And he's always just been a real gentleman and just a sweet guy. And someone who I think arguably stole the show in one of the first best seasons of episode in the history of television,
In Westworld, yeah. Those first couple episodes are pretty remarkable. He had a major part in those ones.
Yeah, man. But we're gonna get into all that, like his audition process and all that good stuff. And he's also a big union guy, and he always has something.
Oh, really?
He's not afraid to buck against leadership.
I'm sure we'll be hearing about that a little bit, though.
Yeah. But let's just get right into it. And thank you guys. If you like the show, then leave a comment or review wherever you listen to the show. And if you're watching it on YouTube, please like and subscribe and all that good shit. And
yeah, thanks everybody for listening. It's good to be back.
All right, here we go. Today's guest is a seasoned actor from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. From a young age, he was drawn to the magic of storytelling, sparked by a memorable trip to the theater when his father took him to see Steve McQueen in Bullitt. Now, back then, he was more inspired to be a stuntman than an actor. Still, after moving to L.A. in the 80s, he guest starred and reoccurred on shows that we still watch today, such as Murder, She Wrote and Columbo. He's genuinely spent decades being a guy we love to watch. Over the years, while he's had an admirable and coveted career, he always knew that the perfect role would find him. It was his transformative experience shooting the pilot for Westworld in 2014 that truly changed the game for him. The perfect role had found him in the name of Peter Abernathy. Our friend is not just an actor, but a storyteller, by way of producing projects with his company, Ranchak Films. He brings depth and nuance to every character he plays. In the last few years, he compelled us on the show The Peripheral, and now he's continuing that decades-long tradition of being excellent on The Night Agent, or so we presume. It hasn't aired yet. Please welcome to the show one of our favorite actors, Louis Herthum. Hey, buddy.
Hey, man. Good to see you, Ronnie.
Likewise. Sorry about that. A little long in the tooth, man, but it is good to see you. I was thinking,
You've done your research.
yeah, man. Well, I kind of like, I don't know if you're the same way, but these actors, these fellow actors that I look up to, I mean, I kind of just like learn about them and, watch them. And it's like, when I was younger, it was like, my friends were doing baseball cards, like collecting baseball cards. I always wondered, like, why don't they have actor cards?
Yeah, you might be onto something there.
So, buddy, as much as I hate these things to be sort of like a retrospective, I feel like you deserve a certain bit of that, right? So you got your SAG card in 1982, correct?
Yes.
And so you've been in the union for over 40 years.
Yeah,
Right.
man, 42. In fact, January, let's see. I actually got my SAG card in July of 82. So it would be this July will make 42 years.
Yeah. Unbelievable, man.
Hey, man, like that.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Yeah. When I think back on it, it really has gone incredibly fast. And it's hard to imagine that it's been that long, but it has. And there've been a lot of ups, a lot of downs.
Yeah.
And a lot of interesting times.
When
go ahead.
When did you get your SAG card? What
I got my SAG card in I think it was I was working on. I moved to Los Angeles in January of '82, and I'd never been out of Baton Rouge for more than maybe 3 weeks on a vacation, right? And so after a few months, I was feeling a little homesick, wanted to go home. I was 25 years old, wanted to go home, see my folks. And while I was there, they were prepping a movie called The Toy with Richard Pryor and Jackie Gleason, which they shot in Baton Rouge. And my agent, who represented me while I was in Baton Rouge, she called me and said, "Look, she was casting the local stuff. She goes, there really isn't a part in this that you could read for, but why don't you consider trying to get a crew position, because maybe you can get your SAG card?" Because I moved out here without a SAG card, which is, you remember back then it was hard as hell to get a SAG card.
Yeah.
A lot easier these days. But so I said, yeah. So I interviewed with the production manager, a super nice guy, Jerry Barowitz was his name. And he's like, we had breakfast. He said, "Lou, I'd really love to hire you, but I got to tell you, the only position that I haven't filled yet is Jackie's stand-in." And I'm like, "Well, I'm game if you are." And he's like, "Well, he goes, stand up." And so we stood up, and he goes, "Well, you're about the same height." And he gave me the job. So for 3 months, I worked as Jackie Gleason stand-in.
Wow.
And the way I got my SAG card, I'll just cut to the chase. Dick Donner was a director. And there's a scene. I mean, you could not film this. You could not make this film today if anybody knows about this film. But there's a scene where Richard Pryor is in a box, a crate, and he's having this scene with Jackie Gleason. Well, Richard wasn't there that day, so Dick asked me to, "Louis, would you sit in the box and read Richard's lines with Jackie?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "Go over there and run lines with Jackie." So I'm running lines with the great one. First of all, was amazing. And then when I got in the box, just before we started rolling, and I'm going through, like, how am I going to do this? Am I going to just do it straight, or am I going to put a little Richard Pryor flair to it? Because I was a huge Pryor fan. I heard all his albums, saw his movies. And so he comes in, it's like one of these moments in time where you remember, I'm sitting in this box, this big crate, and Donner goes like this. He goes, "Hey, Lou, be sure to leave enough space between the lines so we can dub Richard's voice in." And I'm like, okay, I got to do it like I think Richard would do it.
Yeah.
So the very first line is "help," all caps with 5 exclamation points. So when Gleason started with the lines, and the Fraulein, the maid, the housekeeper, whatever, she says, "Eric, if you don't come and finish your supper, you won't open this crate till tomorrow." And the first line is "help." And so I did the best Richard Pryor impersonation, this kind of thing. And then I did the whole scene in my best Richard Pryor impersonation.
Wow.
And the crew started applauding at the end. They all got a kick out of it. Donner came over and he pulled me out of the, clapped me on the back, and he goes, "Oh, you did a great job for your film debut." And he was kind of laughing. He started to walk off, and I said, "Do I get a SAG card?" And he turned around and kind of like he thought it was a joke, and he went, "Ah, ah." And then he started to walk off, and he stopped, and he said, "Do you want one?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Put him on the day player list." So,
Wow.
man in the box is my credit.
Wow, buddy. Wow. Man, I love, by the way, I love that movie, of course.
Oh,
So Jackie Gleason, that must have been amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
It was amazing. He, God bless him, man. It was the second to last movie he did. The last movie he did with Tom Hanks, Common something.
Common Ground, maybe?
Something common something. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But shortly after that, he wasn't the healthiest man. He you know, and he had, I think he kind of had it with all the waiting that happens in films and stuff like that. But it was fascinating to watch him. And, you know, like I say, I worked 3 months with him, and he never called me by name, but it was always, "All right, pal. I got it, pal. Thanks, pal." And fascinating man. And regardless of what his mood was like, because sometimes it wasn't great because, you know, sitting around his trailer waiting. As soon as they said action, man, he was just, was the great one.
I mean, back then, you know, you didn't have all the options, you know, and I was watching these kind of movies early. So you would watch a show. I'd probably watch that movie, 50 times.
Yeah, that was
Actually can see me a couple of times in it. I was also in background a couple of times. They would throw me, "Hey, Lewis, go in there and
Right on.
or something like that." So
Right
it was
on.
a great experience, you know.
So when I think of our business and living in Los Angeles in the 80s, it's, to me, we've talked about it on the show before. It always is a little bit of like the magic years seem to be like the 80s, you know. In fact, we talked with Spencer Garrett about it, you know, because he had such deep roots in Hollywood. But you and you started, you know, you got your first reoccurring on Murder, She Wrote in the 80s, right? Or was that late 80s? That was 89.
Well, I did a role in the end of season 5, which was in 89, and then, you know, you had the hiatus, and then at the end of 89. At the end of 89, I did a show at the beginning of season 6. So I did 2 different roles, and then 2 years later in season 8, I came on as Deputy Andy.
Gotcha.
So I've actually played 3 roles on Murder, She Wrote. So recurring of Deputy Andy started in 91, season 8.
You know, when I watch these shows, like Columbo or Murder, She Wrote, I see so many people like you that like, oh my God, you must have worked with at least a few of those people that character actors that went on to be like legends of some sort, right?
Already were legends.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Like Peter Falk. In fact, I only worked one day on Columbo. I was a little co-star.
Yeah.
And it was his birthday, as I recall. And it was a Monday. And I think the night before, it was the day after the Emmys, and he had won an Emmy. I mean, as I recall, but he was such a warm and very funny man. I mean, that dry humor, you know, just like so and then on Murder, She Wrote, I worked with tons of legendary actors. It was quite an experience. And then, of course, working with Angela and Bill Wyndham and Ron Masak. I couldn't have asked for a better, you know, sort of.
What I love about Peter Falk, you know, he a movie I wrote, he was his last movie.
What?
Called American Cowslip, and we're on set, and Rip Torn is having a little bit of a tantrum, and he's getting into a fight with Diane Ladd, and I see Peter Falk back there just laughing. And you know that he's just got a kick a little bit about the absurdity of life and the business, you know. He was a really neat man, and I still watch those Columbos, man. They rerun, you know. So you got a good run. So by the late 80s, you're working, and are you kind of I guess retrospectively, after the fact, I guess when you're in it, it doesn't seem like magical. But did it feel like a different time in LA in the '80s, early '90s?
Yes. I mean, it did because of, and it was magical, because working on Murder, She Wrote, I had to keep pinching myself, and,
Sure.
because it became so out of the blue, frankly. I mean, I was doing a play, and Ron Stevenson, the casting director, saw me in the play, called me in for a little tiny co-star role, that where I'm playing pool with Jerry Arbach, who's was Harry McGraw was his character's name. And it was a wonderful little scene. And he called me back later for the next season. I did a co-star, a much bigger role with Elliot Gould, which was wonderful. Elliot's a friend today. And it was amazing that, working with him. So there was some pretty magical moments there. Those, like I say, working with these actors that you've seen and for years and admired, and then to be able to talk to them and ask them questions. And then, I remember Elliot when we finished and we were saying goodbye, I was shaking hands with him and saying, "Hey, it's a pleasure working with you." And he kind of stopped me and he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "You're very good. But you need to be, don't be so hard on yourself."
Mm.
And I just kind of like, and he goes, "Yeah, you're kind of hard on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. You don't need to be."
That's great.
That's good.
It stuck with me because I was like, new to like all this. And, if I blew a line or something, I'd be, and he saw that and he was like, "Chill out, dude. You got this." And if they, those little bitty words of wisdom, from actors like that.
It's everything. It's everything. It's everything. On my first guest star, Stanley Tucci, knowing that it was probably one of my first, big things, he came to my trailer and said, "Hey, man, I want you to know you're so good." You know what I mean? And,
wow.
And it's like, I'm like, oh,
yeah, man. I mean, they can have it's a wonderful thing. I try to encourage, young actors when I work with them, because it means a lot, really does.
Yeah, it's everything, and it's and they get it, and especially to get that from someone like Elliot Gould, who's a known hard ass. You know what I mean? Like, so that's like especially cool. Now, what made you transition when you started producing films? Was this some sort of conscious effort to transition away from acting, or was it just opportunities that arose?
It was actually with the intention of having more opportunities to act.
Okay.
Not that it necessarily turned into that. At the end of Murder, She Wrote, after that 5-year run, the last 5 seasons, I don't know, I just had sort of an epiphany, and I came up with a story in my head. And I just decided, I want to take a little more control of my career at that point and start making films. Hopefully, you talk about the role that eventually came and Peter Abernathy. Well, I thought, maybe I'll just find that role and create it. That didn't necessarily happen, but for the next 9 years or so, I produced 6 films. One was a feature-length documentary, but the rest were all narrative, SAG franchise, low-budget films. And I learned a lot. I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot of what to do, and I learned a lot of what not to do. But I worked as an actor in my films, but I kind of took myself out of the whole audition process and everything because I was constantly trying to raise money, put films together. In retrospect, I probably would have done it a little differently because you end up going into debt because you don't want to go back to your investors. So you end up paying for the recut or this or that or the other. And then after that period, my mother, I'm from Baton Rouge, my mother became ill, and we knew that things were not going to really get better. So I moved back there for about 4.5 years to help my sister care for our mother. And lo and behold, Louisiana was booming.
This was 2006.
About that.
about 2006. Yep. And
Okay.
and so I because I really didn't know what I was going to do. I knew that there were films, but I had no idea that it was to the degree it was. So I worked a lot there. And the agent I was working with asked me to teach. I said, I'm not a teacher. I can't teach what I do. She said, well, can you work with these kids? I said, you know what, I'll teach an audition class, because if they can't audition, that's a very important thing. So
Right.
I taught, and that was rewarding. I mean,
Yeah.
teaching really, you learn a lot when you teach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really learn a lot about yourself and about what you find yourself telling your students. The age range was all over the place. What you should do, and you realize you don't do it.
Yeah.
And you go,
Take the rules and break them.
Yeah.
yeah. And
100%.
it makes you a better actor. It really does, because I'm like, you know what? I don't prepare maybe as much as I should,
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And 100%. I agree with that. And also, I've instructed before, not in a formal setting, but just like maybe someone will say, can you work with me on this?
Really?
And I find myself just coming alive, like, oh, you got to do this, and then I'm like, oh shit, like I like this a little too much,
Yeah. Well, it's like directing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, which I haven't directed film. I've directed stage, and I really do enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that at some point I've got a little film in my mind that I want to direct, but don't know if when that's going to happen. And one of the films that I made, my first film, never really got a distribution deal. There were some issues that had to be recut, but it was done in 1996, and I'm very seriously thinking about shooting with the same actors in the same location, which is a friend of mine's house in Baton Rouge, which is completely built up, and he's got corrals and ponds. The 2 oak trees in the front yard are huge now. He's added on to the house, and I'm thinking about shooting modern day and using that old footage as a flashback.
Great idea.
You do it.
Shot on 16 millimeter. What was it shot on?
We shot it on 35.
Wow.
Yeah, back then, it was a $500,000 film. I think 650 was the final budget, but we shot on 35. Yeah. And
That's a great idea. Are most of those actors still with us?
all like my uncle was, if you've seen Forrest Gump, he's the doctor in the beginning, putting the braces on the kid's legs when he falls over.
Yeah, yeah.
Herthum. He's passed on. He was in the film.
He's great.
That's a great scene.
Yeah,
His
yeah.
spine is crookeder than a question mark, something like that. Oh,
His legs are strong, Miss Gump, but his back is crooked as a politician.
Yeah, that guy is so memorable. Wow, that's great.
He was the funniest man I promise you ever met. He was very much in the Don Rickles kind of.
Oh yeah.
Could criticize people constantly, and all they could do is laugh I mean, he had people laughing, myself included, to the point where he had to leave the room. Couldn't breathe.
He must have been proud of you, buddy.
Yeah, he was. He was very proud of me. He was like my best friend, man. That was a tough one. He died in '98, so about 4 years after Forrest Gump, and 2 years after making. And he helped me, raise money, and
Wow.
he's a wonderful guy. So anyway, they're gone, but I have a story worked out, and it wouldn't be hard to do. It wouldn't be that hard to do. So seriously.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, you write those present day scenes as compelling as you want. Just all it has to fit in is these flashbacks. That's a great idea, and I've never thought about what a way to utilize something that didn't get made.
Yeah, or just didn't get. I mean, we sold.
Or didn't get. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody really has seen it, and and it wasn't a bad little film, but it was, it was right at the beginning of that Brothers McMullen had come out the year before. Sling Blade came when I was doing my post-production. In fact, we had the same color timer at CFI, and he's like, you remind me, because my accent can get pretty heavy, especially after being in Louisiana for almost a year and then coming back. He said, "You remind me of this guy. I just did the color time on his movie." I said, "Really? Who?" He said, "His name's Billy Bob Thornton." And I went, "I don't think I know him." He goes, "Did a movie called Sling Blade."
Yeah.
Yeah, you will. And so as soon as that's one of my all-time favorite films. I think that is an extraordinary film.
So when you come back to, well, I want to talk about when you came back to LA in 2010, but I have to ask you this question real quick. When I moved from Texas to Los Angeles in 2000, I had a pretty thick accent, thinking that, and I trained myself to get rid of it. And then I see Matthew McConaughey like owning it, and I'm like, man, I went the wrong direction. Did you own it, or did you try to bury it?
When I first got here in '82, it was really thick, and people would tell me, you better, do something about that. You better at least learn how to lose it when you need to.
Right.
And I think sometimes I was conscious of it, and sometimes I'd go in and do a reading thinking I was losing it, and the casting director would say, "That's kind of it's interesting how you use that Southern accent for this role," or something like that. I'm like, yeah, I just thought that it might work, but yeah. But I think just 42 years, I for the most part it's gone, but I can certainly do it. Like, the Peripheral, Corbell Pickett. I mean, yeah, he had a thick one, but I can call on it pretty easily, as I'm sure you can.
That's a great tool for you guys to have in your back pocket.
Yeah. I even kind of like, now that I went overcorrected in the other direction, like Brendan came to visit me, and he's like, "Hey man, you're really leaning into the Southern, aren't you?" Yeah. So surely when you go back in 2010 and you get the reoccur on True Blood, which is massively successful, that must have been validation that coming back was the right move, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually a little bit later than that. What happened is right towards the end of my mom's life, which was late 2008, then I started kind of coming back and forth. I kept my apartment in Baton Rouge for a little while because there was so much work. And then I got cast in The Last Exorcism, which was this little $1.5 million film, which, by the way, we improv that entire film.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
A lot of people don't know that because the writers, and I love the guys, there was a script, we just didn't get it.
Right.
I actually got the script after I told them I want to see the script, but I haven't. I've still never read it. we got an outline, and use my real name, Lewis. Switzer was my last name, but Lewis meets Reverend Cotton in the front yard or whatever, and that was it. I mean, we got these, but so that was a big hit. I came back to Louisiana. I mean, from Louisiana to LA. I got amazing representation, main title, and at the time I was with progressive artists, Bert Carneal and Bell Zwertling, and but I'm still with main title, Tracy Stanispear and Stuart Strunk, and they changed my career because they just look, all of us, especially when you've been in the business for as long as we have. I'm talking about all actors that have been there, been through hundreds of auditions and been through the ups and downs and everything. We just need the opportunity. We need to get in front of the right people, and we need the right people to get us in front of those people, and that's who they were. So suddenly I was going straight to producers on guest star stuff. And there's a little story here. Bernie told me after about 3 weeks of tons of auditions, man, 3 or 4 guest stars straight to producers every week. He called me, said, "Lou, I want to talk to you about something." I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "I've been getting this feedback on your auditions." And I went, "Okay." He's like, "They're telling me you're a solid actor." And I'm like, "Okay, is that good or what?" And he goes, "It's not bad, but I want him to say he blew us away because I know you can't." And that hit me like, yeah, I feel like I can too, and I'm not. And I mean, I took that to heart and I said, what am I doing wrong? And I came to the conclusion that I wasn't preparing enough for those auditions. So I got like maniacal, man. I went in there and I always was kind of, the old thing, you always got to hold the paper, right? Even if you know it, hold the paper. Right. Don't want them to think this is the best as it's going to get. Which now I think is a bunch of bullshit because, go in there and freaking knock them dead.
Because they don't have any imagination. You got to show them the shit.
That's right. And they don't really, and they don't know what they want really sometimes. But so I that's what I did. And then I'm not kidding you. The very first thing that I booked was The Defenders with Jim Belushi and Jerry McConnell. And it only went one season. And it was a emotional kind of thing, a dad with his kid who, oh God, Marshall, wonderful kid. You know this guy. Marshall, if you see this, I'm sorry.
Marshall,
great.
Yeah. I know you're talking about.
But kind of baby face guy, I was old enough to play his dad, and I played his dad. It was a real emotional kind of thing. And I'm like, I went and I said, I dare him to not hire me. That was the attitude that I took. I dare you not to hire me. And I'd see these actors in the waiting room that are like, have these long careers, and I'm like, I just had people talk about manifesting things, and I started manifesting these roles, winning these roles, and I started working like crazy.
Well, are you talking about like when you talk about this recalibration that stemmed from this note that you're a solid actor? Are you talking about going in there and getting like specificity of moments, like creating like there's had to be more specificity?
Yeah, right? Well, yes, to a degree. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I planned this moment or that moment. What it was for me was being so familiar with the material and listening, even though sometimes you got a really horrible reader on the other side.
Right.
Still listening and reacting. There was certainly times where you planned some specific thing that you're going to do. But what is that? Oh, something came up. Oh, let me decline. Somebody's calling me. Sorry. Yeah, but for the most part, it was just being so, have that material so ingrained in your head that, if you did it 10 times, it'd probably come out different each time because it's just flowing. It's like I used to tell the kids when I was teaching, film acting is, stage acting is bigger than life. Film acting is usually smaller than life. And it's basically doing what we do every minute of every day. Stop acting. Film acting is not easy, but it's simple.
It's simple. Yes.
Simple. Right. And so I don't know. And as you know, I mean, I remember the great Danny Goldman told me this once when I started booking a bunch of commercials. He said, man, he said, Louis, I've been seeing you on all these commercials, and it's I said, yeah, man, I've really been lucky. He goes, yeah, it's not really luck. It's like work begets work. But if there's something that happens to the actors when they start booking jobs, confidence level and everything. He said, if we could model it, we could make $1 billion because it's a real thing. It's just kind of intentional.
And 100%. And also on the other side of that, it's like it's almost like people, like it becomes trendy. You become a part of a trend and it becomes trendy to hire you. You can have like a Mary Vanu or someone who sets a standard and hires you, you know what I mean? But eventually some other people better start hiring you for her to like bring you back to the well, because they're like, oh wait, I want him in this. I want him in, it's wild, man. And also what you say about the work, there's structure, there's freedom in structure. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because especially this day and age, because you can't leave anything that these guys do not have an imagination. God love them. And you got to show them the perfectly striped product. And if you're like, that's why I'm a massive repetition guy. And it got me in trouble early on because I would be committed to these beats.
Right.
But then I learned, oh, just let it go. All the shit that needs to be there to serve the story will come up organically,
Yeah, and it's especially, and then especially on the day when you're actually working with a real actor.
Yes.
And
100%.
And I tell people all the time, and I learned this lesson a long time ago, way long ago. If you completely try to create the role while you're preparing and exactly how you're going to do it and everything, and then you get on the set and it's nothing like you think it's going to be coming from that other actor, and you kind of fucked if you stay. And I found myself in a situation like that, even to the point where we had rehearsed it, and he rehearsed it one way, and then when we did it, it was completely different.
Yeah,
it worked out, but it was not a good moment. It was not a good feeling in that moment.
I've been there, bro. Yeah, I can tell you, I was on. It was the next 3 days, Paul Haggis, and I ended up almost like they called me and said, "Okay, you're going to Ohio this afternoon." I believe what happened, and I could be wrong. Jonathan Tucker wasn't available, and then he became available, so I didn't go.
Oh, okay.
Westworld. Yeah, he's the best. Anyway, so we were working it in the room, and I had done it 1,000 times, and I noticed I kept getting up on the side on the same line, and like getting up on my chair and taking a right, and then finally, I stopped myself because he could see it. I knew he could see it, and he's like, and he looked at me and goes, "This is a little rehearsed, isn't it?" I go, "Yep," and probably cost me the thing, but
that was in an audition.
That was in a room. I believe it was Randy Hiller was casting.
Oh, sure.
I miss her. I know she's with Disney, but I miss, So I wonder. I think we might have been kin on True Blood. I think we might have been related. I only did 2 episodes, but you're a werewolf, and I played, I believe, Lindsay Pulsifer's cousin or brother. Were you related to her? Do you remember? See, I could be wrong.
I was season 5.
Okay.
I played J.D. Carson, which was he was the new wolf pack leader because
that's right.
I think it was his nephew or something that was the guy before him that they got killed and something or another. But that's kind of a lesson too to actors that when I got the audition. And it was actually the end of 2011, I think 2012, when I actually started doing that show. I got the audition, and it said, this J.D. Carson was scripted or in the breakdown as a large Marine type,
right?
Large hulking guy, Marine type, jarhead.
Yep.
I had a full beard, my hair was long, and I'm 5'10", in shoes. And I told my people, I said, they're never gonna, and they said, look, just go in. And so I said, well, I tell you what, the one thing that I will give them is a very true Louisiana accent. So if nothing else, I can give them that.
Yeah.
So I went in, and every huge guy, the room was full of people that I knew, people that you all know, and some of them very big guys. But I went in, and that sort of also kind of like took the pressure off too, because I really felt like, I'm gonna go in and have a good time. And by this time, I was working a lot, and I was just like, auditions had kind of become fun.
Yeah,
chance to do something,
Yeah.
And so I went in there and just let them have it. And when I got the role, so now anytime, and then another time I played George Washington, if you can believe it, on Sleepy Hollow. And I told my people, I said, he was 6'3". He's like, I don't look like. They're like, they know who you are. They want to see you. And I'm like, all right. So I did it, and I got that. So now anytime I go, I'm not right for that, they'll go,
yeah, right.
George,
yeah, right.
Yeah. Like, all right. Yeah, you're right.
Now, for those of you listening who don't know, the casting director for Westworld was both John Papsadera and Diana Brigitti. Diana, who did something for me a while back ago that was pretty substantial. So if you don't mind, I'm sure you've told this. I'll tell you that later. But I want to.
Okay.
So you get the audition for Westworld, right? Um, and I want to know if, I mean, I'd love to hear about it. You have to impart, but I also want to know, like, if you felt, did you glean anything from their reaction during the audition? There's like, oh, I'm giving myself a chance.
Well, okay. It's interesting you bring up Deanna and that she did something substantial for you, because she gave me the best note I've ever received from any casting director. And of course, John Papsidera is one of the all-time greats. People want all-time great. Casting directors, reading, I mean, the guy's a great actor. He sings with you. But I went in first to see just me and Deanna. And for that, I was not reading for Peter Abernathy. I didn't know who Peter Abernathy was. I was reading for another part. But every male at least that read for the part they were reading, and then they read the scene, a version. It was just all three different characters, and all the dialogue was different for, to see how you could play a host. So it was basically the scene I did with Dr. Ford with Anthony Hopkins, but it was different dialogue, and the characters that I was going in and out of were different. But that was the audition scene written just for the audition. So I went in, I did the scene with Deanna. I don't really remember to the degree that I did, but this was a scene and it said Dr. Ford, and he's making you stop and then restart. Did you do that scene? Did you read for the pilot by chance?
No. When I was on it, I was on season 2.
Yeah, I knew that, but I was wondering.
Yeah, I might have gone in, but I certainly didn't read for that. Yeah.
No. And so I said after the first audition, she's like, okay, I want you to come back for the producers. And I said, because I knew the original film very well. I remember it very well. It came out in 1973 and kind of freaked me out. It was very much way ahead of its time. And I said, in that film, you could tell they were robots. Do you want to be able to tell they're robots? She goes, no.
Right.
I cannot tell they are human as you are, except when they're in this scene when he's transitioning from one character to the other.
Right.
Then we want to see some kind of, she goes, do whatever you want. Nothing's too outrageous. And I remember another one of those moments in time. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, here's the note. She goes, you know, when your computer gets the little spinning ball? And I went, oh yeah, I hate that. She goes, that's what's happening to you.
That's a good note.
And in fact, I was sitting in this very chair because I had several days before the callback. And I was, going, okay, what, she even said, she did something with her head. And I'm like thinking, yeah, everybody's going to do that. So I needed to come up with something different. And I was thinking physicality, what kind of physicality would he be doing? And then it just hit me that he's also trying to speak. And I came up with the kind of thing. And that's as soon as I came up with the sound that he was trying to make, it made all the rest of it sort of fall into place. So
it's so good, by the way. It's so great. It's so great. And you're with Jeffrey Wright and Anthony Hopkins in that scene, right?
Yeah.
Effectively stealing the scene. I mean, they must have been so supportive and stoked to be in that scene with you, right?
Oh man, it was amazing. It was amazing. And, Jeffrey was there through the whole thing. He didn't have a lot to say, but Anthony was, or Tony, as he likes to be called, was extraordinary. People say, God, it must have been so difficult to do a scene like that with Sir Anthony Hopkins. And I went, no, just the opposite. He made it easy. He gave it all to me. There was this this generosity of spirit that he just, because if you look at that scene, the close-ups over my shoulder,
Yep.
those are the very first takes.
Right.
And so he's seeing me do that for the first time.
Wow.
That's cool.
Wow.
So
Wow.
Jonathan came up to me and goes, Lou, we're going to do Tony's close-ups first. I said, fine. That's great. I love that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an amazing, we shot that scene all day. It was actually 8 pages. I got 3 additional pages on Sunday before we shot on Tuesday.
Wow.
Mm.
Jonathan called and said, Jonah Nolan called and said, because I had gone in like the Friday before. He said, they had the audition, and I did a lot of pretty much what I did in the, all the machinations and everything in the audition. So they kind of knew what I was going to do, but they hadn't seen it with the actual dialogue. So they said, with the new dialogue, not the audition dialogue. So they said, we'd like you to come in and, and maybe go over this a couple of times. So I did. And I read with Lisa, and Jonah sat there. So it was just the 3 of us. And we went through it twice. I did it full bore, like on Friday before we shot. And I said, what do you think? And they're like, we're good. And
Right.
then 2 days later, he said, look, we love what you did. We're going to, don't hate us. We're going to throw out this, make the scene a little bit longer. It was 8 pages.
Wow, man. And
And so-
by the way, the fact, like, you could make an argument that you were the most beloved character on one of the best first seasons of TV ever. You know what I mean? Because
Thank
you
you.
were beloved. I mean, you know that.
Yeah. Look, what you said in the beginning about, the role that changed everything overnight,
Yeah.
35-year overnight success, right?
And how so?
Well, just the phone's
Everything.
ringing,
Yeah.
and it just and two, the publicity and my IMDb score was like 300 and something, which was kind of crazy to go from in the 20s or whatever it was to see that. It's just people were so kind, and first time really getting recognized where you go. People are so gracious and everything like that. So it's I always kind of say if after that, like my career ended, at least I had that. It was just really such a special moment. And to be doing it with Anthony Hopkins and Jeffrey. But like when we started shooting the coverage, my coverage especially, Jeffrey was standing by, but Tony and I just like, he's a funny man. He's a delightful, sweet, kind, giving man. And he's very funny. And so between the scenes, I mean, he was telling me stories about when he was 15, he lived in the same town in Wales as Richard Burton. He knocks on his door and asks for his autograph. He got his autograph, and then 20 years later, he replaced him in Lion in Winter on Broadway, and he remembered him. He said, "You're that lad that came to my door." I remembered you? And he goes, "Yeah, he remembered me." It was crazy. So, yeah, but he's a lovely man. So the whole experience, and something that you just said, Ronnie, I agree. I think the first season of Westworld is like one of the best seasons of television ever. It was so, different. And
it was, I mean, a tough act to follow, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if we were, I did a couple episodes in season 2. Me and Tim Murphy kind of, I was in a scene with you, right?
We definitely were on set together.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
It was in the lab just before Dolores cut my brain out.
Yeah.
And then there's when you got
Murphy.
that scene, by the way, when you go in there and you kind of get seduced by. That's a great scene.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it doesn't say a lot for Delos. What's the Delos?
Delos,
Delos for security team, right?
That's right. Yeah, look, where is it? Is that there's the
Oh, you still got the shirt.
yeah, it's funny. This is like the most worn garment I've ever owned. This is like I love this hoodie. It was
Oh man, yeah. Well, it's so funny because it's like I don't know if it speaks to me and Tim Murphy were the special ops guy that fly in a helicopter.
yeah.
That was the best we could do. So I don't know if it speaks to how piss poor the security team was, or the art of seduction by Tallulah.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And now I'm sure that I'm sure, and I'm not being hyperbolic here, but I'm sure while stilling scenes from Jeffrey and Tony, I'm sure they learned a lot from you. But is there anything that you gleaned from any one of them that you think about today that's like, oh, does that make sense?
well, certainly. I mean, you can't work with somebody like either of those guys and not. I am so very pleased for Jeffrey and his incredible work in American Fiction and his Oscar nom and his SAG award win.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there was anything specifically, because other than just sort of osmosis, maybe just, when you work with great actors like that, you just, especially with working with Anthony Hopkins, and you just sort of, just it's like it's one of those intangible things that just sort of happens. And there's other actors where Tommy Lee Jones worked with him in a film, and that was an interesting situation. But he, I think about our conversation.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And I think, but we had a conversation about acting in this particular scene that we were doing. But with Tony and Jeffrey, it's just you observe them and you see the simplicity that I was talking about earlier, and how, because it's truly effortless.
Yeah.
Completely effortless. And so you learn by that. So, but as far as specifics, not necessarily.
Yeah. So are you having fun? Like, and the business, are you having fun?
Now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have fun when I actually am on set working. It's changed a lot.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot. And I'm going to say it's not as much fun.
Right.
But I don't know that if that is just because I've been doing it so long. This is kind of a little anecdote that might make somebody chuckle. While I was working on Murder, She Wrote, there were a lot of actors been in the business for a long time. And sometimes they get a little grumpy, And I was on, after we came back from the pandemic, I was working on a show in Vancouver. It was season 2 of a show that I had done called Home Before Dark. And they picked me up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Call time was, we had to drive an hour to set, and then you had to go. And they either made me younger or older for that show. I never did my regular age. So they had to age me with, just putting that stuff that makes you wrinkles and dye my hair and do all that shit. And so I get to the set at, I don't know, 8, 9, something like that. And I'm sitting in a tent, and we're wearing a mask and sitting outside in a tent because it's still COVID, and just waiting. Then by 1, I think, or noon, they call me to rehearse. And then after the rehearsal, we go to lunch. So I didn't get to actually start doing the scene till 2 or 3, something like that. So I've been up almost 12 hours. And I remember thinking, this is why those old guys are so grumpy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just, after a while, it just sort of wears on you,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just reality that people don't, they think it's all glamour and all that kind of stuff.
And plus, when you encounter it, things run smoothly and you have context for that, and then it's not quite that, and then you're seeing things like when you get back from when you get straight off the van from set and there's someone standing there with a sign out sheet because it's the 12th hour and you're like, relax, I'm gonna go get changed.
Yeah. Go out. Yeah. I'll sign it when I am done.
Yeah.
And listen, I mean, since we're kind of going there, I think the true heroes of this industry are the crew. And,
100%.
And those of us that have been in this business a long time certainly know that. Maybe the public doesn't know it, but without them, you got nothing. I mean, we're, just nothing. And so during that strike, I was particularly feeling it for the crew people. They had no dog in the fight, and yet they were out of work. Lost their homes, cars, lost their insurance. Rough time. So shout out to the crews, all the crews there. They're awesome.
100%. And right now they're I think that they're doing really well by kind of getting ahead. For those of you who don't know, Yahtzee is negotiating right now for their big next contract coming up. So I'm always checking in on that, and it seems like, knock on wood, it's going in a good direction.
Yeah, it does. So yes, I do have fun. And, the guy I'm playing now is like one that really made me think about, because he's pretty different from anybody I've played. But I do have fun. So I'm going to throw it back at you. Are you having fun?
Yeah, I'm having fun. It's the strike hasn't really ended for me yet.
Oh, okay.
I went and did a guest star last month on a Chicago fire. It's just,
oh, nice.
It's just, it's been it's just the way it is. Sometimes it's a season, sometimes it's not your season. And that's one thing I've learned, and I'm sure they say winter is coming. Well, winter's been here, and I think spring is right around the corner for me. So it's all good. Yes, I'm having fun. I'm always having fun, and I feel just as gracious and just as happy when I hear that I'm going to work as I did the first time.
We always have to be feel that way about work, even after all these years. And so I'm feel very blessed that I have. And I make no bones about that. I am definitely blessed to be working.
Yeah, and you're so
reminded of that.
And you're just so consistently great, and you're great, and you're great in everything. But preparing for this, I was rewatching a lot of your Westworld scenes, and specifically that first pilot scene that we talked about a bit ago. It's like you're going through this range, like. I could see you needing a massage after that, like you're supporting your body and
you have to, you pretty much tense every muscle in your body to get it to shake and do that. In fact, after I did the 2 rehearsals with Lisa and Jonah on the Friday before, she literally at the end of the scene, I kind of looked at her and she literally was grimacing. She was like, that looks exhausting. And I said, it is. And so by the end of that day, because we shot it, I got there, I don't know, the call was like 7:00. And when I went home, and this was in September, so the days were still long. When I went home, it was dark.
Yeah.
And we shot that one scene all day long. And yeah, I was like, but so man, I was wired. Because what had happened. Wow, did that just happen? Did I actually do that?
It was really remarkable. And I listen. I know that sometimes process questions can be a little cringy, but people talk about like method acting versus not. And I was thinking the other day, maybe I have an inclination towards, when I say method, more like personal substitution in these scenes. And it occurred to me, maybe I do because I'm not a good enough actor not to be, you know what I'm saying? Because I do find it's so effective, right? Are you, do you kind of dabble in everything, whatever works? Do you rely on what the imagination gives us from the script? Substitution or what?
It's pretty much, I use the script as my blueprint, and gotcha. I think that the longer we've lived, the more ups and downs you've lived through are sort of again become sort of this innate part of you. I think I learned very early on that being in touch, as much in touch, fully in touch with your emotions and how you handle different emotions was really key. And now, in that scene, my biggest dilemma, if you will, for Peter was, the plight that his daughter was going through. And my daughter at the time, we shot it actually in 2014. It didn't air until 2016.
Okay. Gotcha.
But my daughter was 10 years old when we shot that. And she's my life. She's everything. You got a kid, man, that changes, and so, and she's this beautiful blonde-haired girl. That like looking at Evan, I almost see my daughter.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
We have the same blue eyes with a dark rim around the outside, and that's another one we always talk about. I just love working with her.
Yeah, she's remarkable.
Unbelievable connection. But so I pretty much would just use when we're talking about Dolores, and I say, I am what I am because of her, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And that's kind of true. It's true.
Wow.
There's a lot of me and Peter.
Yeah.
A lot of me and Peter. And I'll tell you another little interesting thing. When I find the photograph in the ground at the ground.
Yeah.
I had to try to figure out how I'm going to look down and just see this photograph, right? Because it's not like, it's got to be. So I said to Jonah, I said, well, and we were talking before we shot it. And I said, well, maybe I'll just turn and spit. And he went, oh, no, Peter wouldn't do that. And I thought that was really interesting. Peter is he wouldn't even spit.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be programmed to spit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that told me a lot about Peter too. Now, this I'd already shot. I can't remember if I had shot that scene with Tony. I don't think I had by then because we shot all that in Utah.
Page. Were you guys in Page, Utah?
We're in Moab.
Yeah.
We went out, me and Murph went out to Page, Utah.
Oh, really? Okay.
The prettiest place. Brendan, you ever been to Page, Utah?
Been in that area, but never been to Page. It's gorgeous out there.
Stunning. Yeah. Yeah.
It was in the outskirts of Moab, but it wasn't very far. It was just on the outskirts, but it was Monument Valley where, so that's where we shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I basically use that, that is my blueprint. And I feel that I'm pretty well, people have asked me a million times, you got kind of scary there. You went from like this loving father to like this really kind of scary dude. And I say, you don't have a dark side,
right?
You don't have a dark side.
Yeah.
I think we all do. And as far as, I don't know. I guess.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I just want to, as we wrap things up here, I just want to say that I want to thank you. We do have this, I think actors, there's this fraternity, and there's kind of fellowship amongst us. And it's like even though you might really be a little bit of an acquaintance, there's kind of this brotherhood that we share. You know what I mean? I've always shared that with you, even if it's from afar. You've never been if I would maybe come to you with something and you would call, like sometimes it was union issues, like because I know you're not afraid to buck the system on an issue. You're very passionate about that as it relates to the Screen Actors Guild, and I think I think in addition to being this extraordinary actor, you're also just a good person and a good friend. So I want to thank you for being that for me.
And Matt, the
Yeah.
feeling's mutual, and you're so right about that. That sort of brotherhood and sisterhood,
Yes.
and it's like it works on that high level where all those people that are, you know, at the award shows and getting all the awards and everything, and then it happens on our level, where we're working actors that you know, literally are in the trenches. It literally, you know, it's just like it's like soldiers at war. I mean,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
they're in it together. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And I-
Brendan, I want to apologize to you a little bit. I feel like I was so excited to be back in this and talk to our boy. I hope I didn't.
No, that's good.
Okay. Okay.
Oh no, hell no. I mean, I love, and let me tell you, I watched all of your podcasts and these interviews, and you know, it was great. I particularly love the one with Eric Lang.
Yeah.
'Cause he's such a great guy, and I had the pleasure of working with Eric. And what a wonderful actor he is.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm very honored that you would choose me to do this. I really
Oh
am.
man, you kidding? Yeah, man. And we took a little bit of a break. So you're our first guest back, and what can we say, man? We love you, and keep doing the great work, man. Thank you, my brother.
Great work, Lewis.
My pleasure.
All right, bye, buddy.
See you, pal.
Good.
See you, Brandon.
Thanks.